Yeah, let me know when we're live. We're live right now? Fine. Hi. What's up, everybody? I am in control of the first look. We wouldn't have it any other way. Holidays are here. Happy holidays to all of you. You're going to hear me say that multiple times. And look what we did. We took the college duo, the betting you, and we brought them to the pro leagues. Ben Rasa and Matt Gajewski, we are here to talk a little Christmas football 2-game slate. I know there's a main slate going on. I know there's a Thursday slate. I know there's a Saturday slate, but you know what? Let's focus on Christmas. If you're watching this, maybe you don't have time on Christmas Day to prep your lineups. This is where you want to be. We're going to go through a first look. We're going to talk about all the intricacies of a 2-game slate. We'll get into some goblins, and we'll have some fun with it. Sir, normally on Tuesdays, I'm talking to you about the college football playoff or the Sun Belt or something like that. I don't get to do a lot of NFL shows with you. How are you feeling with a little Christmas slate ahead of us?
I'm doing great. I love the holiday football, so I don't need to watch the NBA. Have we ever done an NFL show together?
I don't know. I feel like along with me, but I can't place one. I mean, yesterday, ironically, we almost could have, but it was the reverse. I was on your show, but I was in for you. And we got to talk about the corpse that is the New Orleans Saints, one of the more disgraceful performances I've ever seen. Don't even get me started. Jordan Mims was the best player on the field for them, and I didn't know he existed. Sad. Just a sad showing on all fronts. But we're treated to at least 4 really good teams here, and that's exciting to get into.
We just got Fernando Mendoza committing to Indiana. I mean,
What did I
couldn't
just
be
say
a
before the
better.
show? I knew he'd come up.
You brought him up before the show, and here he is committing right as we go live. Anyway, this is an NFL show. But we are kind of treated to 2 games that I'm very excited for. This is not like the Saints-Packers showdown of last night. Texans, Ravens, Chiefs, Steelers. I mean, whoever designed the schedule, they got a really good run out for these 4 teams on Christmas. It's going to be an awesome slate.
Awesome slate, and it's something that I can't remember the last time. Maybe this has never happened. We're just running back the slate because these were all the same teams that we just saw on Saturday. They just flipped opponents. And so it's really interesting. Basically, the player pool is exactly the same. Obviously, Tank Dell suffered an injury, and there's going to be some nuance to it. But I can't remember ever seeing a slate where we get a 2-game slate and then the same 2 games with the 4 teams in just a few days' time.
I did not even realize that was the case, but it makes sense because you can't have guys
Can't.
on 3 days rest. But
100%.
I did not realize they were just flipping opponents. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
It's kind of cool, though. Like, you get the same player pool.
Well, I had a terrible slate that day. I thought I had the absolute nuts and played Joe Mixon over Derrick Henry. So I need to right some wrongs from my Saturday slate. I did not have a good one.
I was okay. Worthy really helped. And then I'm trying to even think what went wrong. Some things definitely went wrong. Ravens helped. Andrews helped. But yeah, we're going to get into it right now. We're going to start, though. We're all about tradition here at Stokastic. And friends, I know we got a lot of people in chat. What's up? Made it to the finals of the best ball. Good luck to all our best ball players out there. Hopefully someone takes it all down. But we start this show always the same way. I don't care who's here. It's goblin time. It's pretty simple criteria. There is none. But anyone that irked you, anybody that has set back society and football, and there's a lot of candidates. I'm cycling through. Obviously, the Saints are in my mind. The Titans would be another candidate potentially. Honestly, even the Colts, because they, instead of playing normal football in the second half, they just ruined the game by running Trey Sermon into the line for 2 straight quarters and really killed my Anthony Richardson shares. I'm trying to think what else we got, though. I think for the most part, it was a pretty goblin-less slate. So I'm just going to stick with the low-hanging fruit for Christmas and go with the Saints. I know they were out of players last night, but I don't know if you watched the game. The play that really encapsulated what I'm talking about is when they didn't understand the rule before half, and the coach just watched the clock tick down for 30 seconds, and then he yelled. He seemed frustrated. What a disgraceful showing. The Packers had 9 players with a rushing attempt. That's how sad it was. They were just giving handoffs to anyone that would take them. Saints are a goblin. Their coach is not going to win Goblin of the Year, but he is on the board after last night's showing.
I have nothing to really add to
I mean,
that.
my God.
He called it a miscommunication at halftime in his interview, which just made me laugh. It's like, buddy, you shouldn't even need to have that be communicated to you. You were the head coach, even though you're an interim. You're the head coach of an NFL football team. If you're trying out for a job, like you just earned yourself another special teams coordinator job, probably out of heading head coaching. You just can't have stuff like that happen. That's like what happened to Eberflus at the end of their game, and he
Yes.
got the axe immediately. Like that is one of your main responsibilities as the head coach is to be on top of those things. He gets like a little bit of a pass because it's not really his job, but yeah, man, it was embarrassing is what it was. Like you need to get those things right because you're already 14-point underdog.
It, the amount of coaches that talk like they're not the head coach in this league is insane. Antonio Pierce does that. Gerard Mayo does that, where they're like, yeah, it's like, no, it starts with you. You're the coach, man. I'm not going to give a second goblin, but I will say the Cardinals also disgraced themselves. Just a terrible loss. Not that Carolina's not playing better, but just Trey McBride was a ghost. Kyler is not it. Anything else that caught you could do a college goblin if you want. Those games were all blowouts. You could take Paul Feinbaum down on the show, whatever you want to do.
There's one I can't believe you didn't mention, and it's Kyle Pitts. Like you saw the play, right?
Kyle Pitt. So not only did I see the play, I saw your tweet about the play. I forgot about that. You all the time, one of your staple sayings, I do a lot of shows with you, is volleyball set the ball to the opponent. When you talk about turnover worthy plays versus big time throws, that is the definition. He literally did the water boy where Bobby Boucher takes the ball and gives it to the opponent. I'm not sure I've ever seen a play like that. It was truly awful.
I usually say that, as a bit of hyperbole.
Yeah.
When you have turnover worthy or I guess I should say like good throws that end up being interceptions, non-turnover worthy plays that are picked. Sometimes they're a little off place, like the ball's a little high. It's a ball that a receiver should catch, but when you throw it high and it gets tipped, it's very easy for defenders to get their hands on interceptions. This was none of that.
No.
I don't know if you could have thrown the ball better right at Kyle Pitts' numbers. Somehow he can't secure it. And as he's turning up the field towards the end zone, towards the pylon, he literally hands the ball to a defender. I don't know that I've ever seen a more egregious play in my entire life. I've been watching a lot of football at a lot of different levels. UFL, college. My buddy's a high school coach. I go to a million of their games. I've seen some really bad football. And Kyle Pitts, I think, really just takes the cake. That is the worst play I've ever seen from a player who's just flat out not been very good.
Yeah, I mean, just top 5 draft pick. I think it's safe to say that Bowers was what they were looking for. And I'm not sure they're going to get that. That's a good one. I forgot about that play. And Penix looked pretty good. I'll give him credit. He did. Now the corpse of the Giants is the Giants, but those are some good goblins. All right, couple things from chat, and then we'll get into it. Merry Christmas, gents. Thanks for allowing me to print money with all these promos. Yes, we will get to the promos. There's the play. Look at that. My God. The promos right now that we are running are just out of control. I'll get into them in depth. You see one on the screen, though. Gift EV for Portfolio EV, just fire. And then Joe Herman, just a thank you for the content. Very generous. His first super chat. Just thank you guys. We love doing these shows, and it's because of everyone. And the holidays really are just the best time for the Stokastic family with all of us. We get to celebrate with you guys, and hopefully you're doing the same with everyone in your orbit. But we got 4 teams. We've got, you mentioned, these are good teams, no doubt about it. So let's just start to dive into it. Obviously, limited options on a 2-game slate. We only have 4 quarterbacks. And again, you've got Lamar and Mahomes, Stroud and Russell Wilson. Lamar, of course, is the most expensive. When you look at this, do you do anything different? Like, do you up the game theory, or do you still break it down as you would a normal slate?
I think you definitely need to consider game theory. Depending on what you're playing, of course, I'm talking mainly larger field stuff. My first takeaway with this is the gap in pricing between Lamar and the other players on this slate. So as the day goes on and we get our first set of projections and ownership, I'm very curious to see what the projection gap is because I anticipate there being one. The Ravens are pretty decent favorites in this game, even on the road. The Texans have just been lifeless on offense. Lamar has the dual threat ability, and he's having the most efficient season of his career. even in the spots where we expect Derrick Henry to get it done when the Ravens are heavy favorites, it's like Lamar still is such a big part of this offense. 2 weeks ago against the Giants, everyone was trying to play this game and smash Derrick Henry, and Lamar just ended up with 5 touchdowns because he's so efficient. Like, they didn't even really get to the red zone that much. They just had long touchdowns with Lamar. And then the other thing to consider is ownership, because I'm guessing Lamar is probably going to be the most owned just when you look at Mahomes on a bum ankle. Somehow he was running on that thing. I can't believe Mahomes had the game he did. Then Stroud, who's he's going to be playing with some like practice squad level guys. They're signing Deontay Johnson, who's not going to play. I mean, I'm not really optimistic about him. And then there's Russell Wilson, game manager extraordinaire. You just kind of run out of alternatives. So as we get more information, I'm curious to see how owned Lamar is, because you definitely need to make some concessions to get him too. So it's a very, very interesting slate. Tentatively, he's got to be my favorite. I just don't know how you really make a case for anyone else.
No, and I think that, again, it is all about, just like Showdown in some ways, trying to be unique without being stupid. I think I will try to mix it up, somewhere else. Because to me, Lamar, of course, we know about the rushing upside. I'm just not sure. And, again, we'll see what the weather is in Pittsburgh. That game is there. The other game is in Houston, so we know that's good. But that could render Kansas City and Pittsburgh even further behind. And the interesting thing about the slate we just saw with Mahomes, he threw the ball 41 times, and that's very encouraging. But the reason he even quote unquote got there or had a respectable score was he had a 15-yard rush touchdown. That was really
on the bum ankle. I did not think that was in play.
Insane. Like, so that was he had 9.3 points on the ground. He didn't have a prolific passing day. He had 1 touchdown through the air. He had 28 completions for 260. I mean, nothing too special there. So to me, I think it just has to be Lamar. It's going to be more about, on a 2-game slate, would you consider maybe being like different by just running Lamar naked or something?
I think it'll be hard with pricing just because the Ravens have like a lot of cheap guys too.
Yeah.
So if you're running like the Sims or something, I imagine you'd have to be like really going out of your way to get Lamar naked. Just you'll probably walk into some Ravens value just because they're cheap. But yeah, I mean, thinking about how you play him is going to be key on this slate. And that's the thing, is we have expensive guys with Zay. Maybe using him with like Derrick Henry could be a way to soak up just less.
That's what
ownership.
I did on Saturday, actually, is I had them together, and it worked. Part of it was because I couldn't spend really the salary. If you didn't use Mixon, you could kind of do whatever you wanted.
That's what I did.
Yeah, no, and I had plenty of Mixon, believe me. Crab Pit, again, a very generous super chat. You guys are the best. Your 5th super chat, very, very impressive. I'd love to see it. I mean, gut feel of the 4, I would say Russ probably the lowest owned, do you think?
I would,
outdoors against the Chiefs?
Yeah, I would guess so. What do you think between Stroud and Mahomes? I think Stroud honestly might be the second most owned, but I don't know. Mahomes off like the recency bias game. But if you were like forcing me to pick between the two, I think I would prefer to save the 500 in the better game environment. I think out of the defenses, like this, maybe the best matchup on the slate is Stroud against Baltimore's defense. Yeah. Otherwise, like they're pretty good defenses, the other 3 teams. But I don't know. Mahomes is just more talented at this point.
I would agree. I would go Stroud. And I mean, clearly you're barring being really different. You're attaching Nico. You've got Schultz as people. There's going to be a lot of Stroud, Nico, Schultz. That's pretty clear. That's a very popular, reasonable stack. And we'll get into wide receivers. But you mentioned what are we? Xavier Hutchinson and Met, there's just not that much after those guys. And then Mixon, you could go Stroud, Mixon maybe, and that would be a way to be different.
This Texans receiver room is going to require some parsing. There's a lot going on that I don't feel good about.
No.
But what I can say in relation to Stroud is that you're going to walk into some cheap Texan stuff. Like, it's almost like the Ravens in a way, but this is due to injury. You've got your expensive receiver, your expensive pass catcher in Nico. You could pair with Mixon if you want the expensive running back. You can do all those same things on the Ravens with their counterparts. But then because of injury, you have like 3 or 4 cheap options that are going to be on the field a lot that sort of make this a nice game environment to stack as a whole. Basically, all these teams kind of have like at least one cheap option I'm interested in. It's actually a really fun slate to play with a lot of ways you can go. I guess we'll get there, but man, I don't feel even good about the playing time, projecting it for these Texans receivers.
It's going to be difficult. Let's get to running back, though. Before we do, I did promise, like I said, we have so much going on in the descriptions. Certainly we'll get you there, but one that's on the screen is Gift EV. For the holidays, if you, or one of two things. If you bet sports already, then I know this is for you. If you don't, and you're a DFS player, you really should consider adding this to the portfolio. And pun intended, portfolio EV can help make you some money. It's really powerful stuff. It takes a lot of the principles that we built here at Stokastic and transfers them to betting. What do I mean? Instead of focusing on one lineup with all the variants, most people, they build a portfolio of lineups. Some build 150, some build 20, whatever. We're doing it with betting. We're instead of betting one single game, you can bet hundreds of small edges on these markets that are back tested to give you profitability, and you smooth the variance, linear growth. It's good stuff. Obviously, there's ebbs and flows, but if you want to know more about what I'm talking about, the code GIFTEV is going to give you a full month. And I can confidently say you use these tools for a full month, good things are going to happen. We've been using them, so wanted to get that right out there for the holidays. I know a lot of you in chat already use these tools, and you get Discord as well, so absolutely worth checking out. Now, what are we going to do? Derrick Henry leads us off. He's 8,200. He had 24 carries in the last game. I actually want to talk right about the Ravens because Justice Hill had I mean, I'm no doctor, but it didn't seem like a good concussion. He took quite a spill. Do you think anyone steps up, or does this just make Baltimore a one-man backfield?
I think you will see some other guys, but I don't know if you can really replicate the skill set that Justice Hill has. Like the other guys on the roster, you have Rasheen Ali, not really much of a pass catcher. Keaton Mitchell, who's played 4 snaps this year off, the devastating knee injury. Even if they wanted to just one-for-one replace somebody, somebody in place of Justice Hill, like I don't know if Keaton Mitchell can play that many snaps, which is crazy because like Justice Hill generally is getting in the 20s, maybe low 30s. And then you've got Ricard, who's a giant fullback. So I almost think by default, you have to see a little more Derrick Henry. And that was the case when Hill went out. We saw him play a season high 74% of the snaps. I don't think it's ever going to touch like 80, 85, but instead of, I don't know, the 62.5%, maybe it's closer to like 68.5, 70. And maybe you get like an extra target here or there. So I do think it helps. Just not sure if it's really ever going to be in that like 90% range.
Derrick Henry could be amongst, if not the most popular player on the slate. It seems like you'll have salary to spend. Coming off a big game, he's got in the dome against Houston. Going to be busy. On the flip side, though, Mixon, he went against the Chiefs in Arrowhead, and he certainly wasn't good. I was on him. You were on him. But the game was tough. He had 14 carries. He only had 2 targets. What are you expecting there? Is the bounce back for you? I'd say this is maybe Baltimore's worse against the pass, in my opinion, so it's not ideal, but Mixon should look better at home here.
I would agree with that. It's hard to look any worse.
Also true.
And he's still handling a monstrous workload. I'm not really going to read anything into like the Dare Ogunbowale snaps. I don't think that's going to be anything to worry about. And that was Ogunbowale's high in snaps since week 9. So, I mean, I don't really think there's much to worry about with Mixon's workload. I think the real decision point on this slate is what do you do with the studs? So you can play, let's kind of bucket this. There's Lamar, there's the 2 stud running backs, and then there's like a little cohort of receivers. I think you should include Pickens and Flowers with Nico. You can play 3 of the 4 pretty easily, but you can't play all 4. You need to make some concessions somewhere. So I'm very curious to see where this concession comes. My current leaning is that it's probably not going to be the elite backs. I wouldn't be surprised if it's like Nico or one of the other receivers that come in lower owned. I'm just guessing there's going to be a big projection gap between Henry, Mixon, and then the rest of the field. You can really poke a pretty significant hole in everyone. Pacheco's still not playing the role we thought, and it doesn't seem like he's going to at this point. Warren and Harris had some really weird usage in the most recent game. Warren at like 67% of the snaps to Harris at 28%. Harris has now seen a declining snap share in 4 consecutive weeks. 52, 42, 33, 28. You can poke a hole there. And then, of course, once you get below this, we're talking like Kareem Hunt, Keaton Mitchell, that range, which those guys are just
Sheen Ali.
yeah, GPP darts at best. I mean, what do you think on that? Because you can't play all four studs. You got to pick three. I tentatively think it's not going to be the running backs that come in low owned.
I would agree. I think what most people will do is it'll be an if clause. If you play Lamar, you will be way less inclined to play both Mixon and Nico without Stroud. And that's where you'll split it. You'll probably go Henry. If you were talking 3 of 4, you could jam both, pay up running backs, and then you'll probably bump at wide receiver because you're like, you know what? I don't want Nico and Mixon without Stroud. Now, if you bump Lamar and you go Stroud, I would say obviously Lamar will be gone because you're playing Stroud, and Nico will be way more in those lineups, of course, and maybe Mixon would get the boost out, but you could play all of them if you want. But I'm with you. Long story short, I think most people are going to make room for the big two at running back, because you mentioned it's a $2,000 gap between Mixon and Pacheco, but it kind of feels like it should be.
I agree with that. You could make a case that Warren is maybe in a mini tier of his own just because of the usage in their most recent game, but that's putting an awful lot of weight to just one game. I will say Warren's skill set kind of insulates him. He is the preferred pass catching back, not by a lot. Like Najee's a fine pass catching back himself, but the snaps have been all over the place for this team throughout the entire year. You could even make a case for Najee's just a low owned pivot coming off a season low in snaps for him at 28%. But I think the Pittsburgh backs are interesting. Where are you at with Pacheco, man? Because I've been playing him week after week, thinking they might slowly ramp him up. We saw him just play a season low in snaps. So I don't know what to do with this Pacheco stuff. Like P. Ryan, I thought would be completely phased out. Carson Steele is still playing some snaps. Like, what are we doing?
I don't really understand. I'm with you 100%. Like, he's working back, 37% to 46%. I expected by now he'd be at 65, 70%, and he's not. Kareem Hunt outsnapped him. So honestly, taking it further, do you think Kareem Hunt's playable? I mean, he obviously fell in the end zone, and if you had him, you unlocked the slate. I never in a million years was going to get there. Do you think he's playable here?
Probably for tournaments, but it's a 4-way backfield or 3.5. Maybe Steele's not really seeing anything significant, but he is taking away a handful from everyone else. Yep. But with that said, you still have Hunt. P. Ryan is playing too much. And I mean, I get it. He's a superb pass catching back, which is almost like the worst case scenario for DFS because it removes valuable snaps from someone that actually might do something fantasy wise. But then it's still Hunt, P. Ryan, Pacheco. With Pittsburgh, at least it's narrowed to mostly 2. Patterson's still kind of an afterthought there. So unless it's like Millie Maker style stuff, huge field, I think I'm probably just going to play a Steelers back over the Chiefs at this point, which is wild to say. I mean, we'll see where this comes out. Maybe I'll still do the Pacheco boost in the event that he plays more, just because I don't want to be behind the field on that. But I don't know. It's getting pretty disheartening.
I'm with you. I think you're going to have to. I mean, we'll wait for a small piece of news to drop with Justice Hill. That's really the only thing I think we're waiting for in the backfield. I don't think it really alters anything. Derrick Henry's beyond in play no matter who's back there. And I don't think that really any secondary Baltimore player in the backfield's in play outside of dart throws anyway. Yeah, I mean, so it'll be, again, you want to talk game theory. If you somehow fade both of the running backs up top, you can basically play everyone you want, but I just don't know if you can make up those points. That's my biggest concern.
I don't think you can outside of like an injury. And how would you even do it? Like you would need either Pacheco to be in his old role or just like the Steelers to dominate on the ground and you play them both. I'm not sure how you get there.
Yeah, I mean, you would need a weird. I mean, Warren would have to factor. You'd have to hopefully get there on like PPR volume or something. That's a tough sell. That's a tough sell for me. One of them, absolutely, but I don't know if I can get around.
I also think that lineup might be duplicated. We talk about this in Showdown sometimes. A lot of guys they're like, oh, I want to play the value guy. I want to play the guy that's 1K. to jam all the studs. It's like, well, the other guy that has that thought is probably doing the exact same thing as you. And when you do that with both running backs, okay, maybe you have some differentiation because you're playing two of the three, like Warren, Najee, and Pacheco probably. But then, like, I know you're playing Lamar. I know you're playing Nico. I know you're playing Zay. You know what I mean?
100%. Because what ends up happening is you can't spend the money, and then it's like, okay, well, I could leave a bunch on the table, but now you're still playing the raw points game. You don't get like a rebate for leaving money on the table. It's not like it can't work, but it's like, well, my guy, I got 2.5x per dollar, and you only had 1.9, but I lost. It's like, yeah, because I spent all the money. So you're going to be 1v1ing like a 5K guy versus my 7K guy potentially, and that at times can be really problematic. So it's going to be fascinating. I'd say for me, it's pretty clearly the top two. Like most people, Jaylen Warren seems to be the mystery man. If he's going to continue to see 5 targets and double-digit carries, he's got to be third for me at this point.
I agree. I think Najee's probably fourth, then Hunt. Man, I just have a hard time with Hunt. He's like Jamal Williams from like two years ago. Like he's just fine. He does nothing well, but nothing poorly.
I'd rather play it right now. And again, it's first look for Christmas here. I would rather play Pacheco than Hunt and just blindly back that he might take the backfield. I'm not playing Kareem Hunt off that game. I'd rather play both Pittsburgh backs.
I agree.
All right. Let's get to wide receiver. One thing I was just talking about, we've had some crazy success, and I will shout out Aaron Costa, Stokastic guy who's doing some things. The avatars are everywhere, and I could say pretty confidently, a lot of them, they've been known to use the sim tools all the time. Very powerful stuff. And if you want to use these tools, certainly we have our deals running, but I'll tell you the way, and you've probably heard it before. You can just get them for free if you want. It's pretty easy. You can get them through the Super Bowl and rev it up with the code CELEBRATE, but you can also get them for free by working with our partners. So what that means is pretty simple. You go to that landing page and it's right on the screen. Any of those, from Underdog to FanDuel, BetMGM, Bet365, find the one that's in your state, find the one that interests you with the bonuses, because you still get them from the site. If you sign up through the landing page and you claim the offer, not only do you get the whatever bonuses they're offering, you get a month of any core DFS package for any sport that you want, and it's stacked. So if you pick 3 of the books that you're interested in, you now have 3 months to play with. You could do a couple months of NFL and an NBA month, and you're in business. You have the tools that the people are using to hopefully really take your game to the next level, and it didn't cost you a dime. Far from it, because you have the bonuses from the site, and now you've got the tools to support you. It's the coolest thing we've done. Obviously, we worked really hard to make sure that this worked with everything, and we got the deals done, and now everyone's reaping the benefits. It's great for us, great for you guys. It brings people into the ecosystem, and they get in equipped, ready to make money using these tools. So if you're interested in that and you haven't checked it out, great way to do it without breaking the bank or anything. Far from it. You get right in there and you see what we're about. So I wanted to give that a shout out. Whew. All right. So you mentioned a couple guys right off the top, and I know we don't know, but you're projecting, as am I. You think Pickens is going to be good to go. It seems like he's been good to go, but now he's really going to be good to go.
I just don't know what to believe with Pickens. I don't know if he's telling the truth ever, what the deal is, but he's getting full practices. So I'll trust the practice reports more than whatever Pickens says. And if he plays, it changes the offense entirely. So I think it brings more Pittsburgh players in play, and him specifically. Like, he's priced a little bit down compared to the other players on this slate. Up at the top, mainly just Nico, I guess. I'm a little surprised he's not more expensive than Zay, but yeah, it's hard to not really like Pickens if he's logging full practices.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. Pittsburgh's offense sorely has missed him, and he was on a nice run there. He had 25 targets over that last 3. Zay, I don't know what the deal is. I didn't even know he was hurt. But we'll have to monitor that. And then you've got Nico up top. I think it's pretty clear, given the situation, no Dell inside Baltimore's defense. Nico Collins is going to be, he was very popular on Saturday. He's going to be crazy popular here.
Absolutely. He should be. I'm still very curious to see where this shakes out with the big 4 expensive players on this slate. But I almost think it might be Lamar that gets left out,
I
man. Like
agree.
Nico's going to have such a projection gap between these other players. I imagine. I could be wrong on this,
No, he's
but
he's gonna be. I think Nico might be the most popular play on the entire slate.
I wouldn't be surprised, man. There's such a gap between the others. And ceiling wise, I do think Pickens and Zay have a similar ceiling, but you're the locked in target share Nico's going to have without Dell now, in addition to Diggs, it's going to be crazy.
He had 10 targets in the last game quietly. He didn't find the end zone. Uh, it's going to be, and again, this matchup, everything checks out from being at home to Baltimore's secondary. Huge gap. He's $1,700 clear of Pickens, but he should be. And I think there will be some Lamar regression in the sense that, again, with Nico, not that you need to do this, it's 2 games, but the incentive to play Stroud only grows and grows with more guys, because we'll talk about Schultz in a bit. When you look at Kansas City, we know what the deal is. It's very difficult to decipher. But one big piece of news was that Hollywood Brown returned. He wasn't really a factor in the slate because he was flat 3 and you almost didn't need to get down there. He's bumped up to 45. But is this someone that we really need to start considering that he's going to be a real focal point or at least involved in the Kansas City offense?
I think he'll certainly be involved. There's just no question he's better than players like Juju Smith-Schuster, who, thank goodness, saw his lowest snap count since percent-wise, 36%, since week 11. Like, we can just get Juju off the field now entirely. Make this a 4-man rotation if you want. I would prefer 3, like just give me Worthy, Hopkins, and Marquise Brown every snap, but I know that's not going to happen, at least at this point. One, because you got a couple veteran receivers coming off injuries. Obviously, Marquise Brown off the collarbone, but Hopkins came into the year with an injury, and he hasn't really jumped that far above 50% of the snaps for this team recently. Had a 60% and a 65% in weeks 9 and 10, but very clearly below that recently. And then Worthy's just like electric field stretching gadget player who seems to be putting it together of late. Watson does like the gritty stuff for this offense, so I can understand using him when you have players like Marquise Brown and Hopkins who you don't want to give a full complement of snaps to. But like, I don't need to ever see Juju Smith-Schuster again. So I'm hoping at the expense of Juju, the Marquise Brown snaps continue to rise. We won't know that for sure. But I don't think they're going down like 20 snaps, 27%. I think that's the floor for Marquise Brown at this point, and there's upside for a lot more considering his talent level and what they've been putting on the field in place of him while he's been injured.
And he was busy. He only had, you mentioned, 20 snaps. How about 8 targets? I mean, it's pretty crazy. So he was involved, and I think he's going to continue to be involved, and he will certainly be a factor there. Worthy, I mentioned to you earlier in the show, he really helped me. He had a big week 16. He had 11 targets. That's back-to-back weeks with 11 targets. He had 3 carries in back-to-back weeks. He finally scored a touchdown, which I was stunned that he has 8 on the year because I bet him to score every week and he never scores somehow, but okay. So shout out to him. And he's the one guy, you never say with the Chiefs, everything's in flux. He's holding pretty steady that he is on the field almost all the time relative to everyone else in that wide receiver room.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense though. Like, you've got veterans that have been hurt and bad players. So I mean, Worthy, do you see anything changing? I really don't.
I don't. I mean, he's a dynamic playmaker that can get him the ball in a lot of different areas. His floor is rising because he's got multiple targets each game with an A.0 of 0. They just give him the ball as an extension of the run.
That's kind of good.
He's in a good little spot. Now, he tweaked an ankle, but it wasn't bad. He came back to the game.
The only thing I think you could really say against him, I'm talking his playing time, is he kind of works like Marquise Brown in certain ways. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for this offense. Plus, Hopkins and Kelsey are very different than the two of them. I still think the best possible configuration of this pass game is Hopkins, Worthy, Marquise Brown, and Kelsey on the field. And then do your weird little 2 tight end stuff, like take off Hopkins and Brown to keep them healthy coming off the injuries is what it is. But Worthy, young and spry, he hasn't dealt with anything like that. I'm not anticipating this really affecting him much.
No, I'm with you. I think his role is solidified. We got a super chat from Bogey. He's new. Welcome aboard, my friend. I'm new. Do you 100% listen to The Sims? How would you tweak? So obviously every slate is different. Ways to tweak would just be if you like a player, you could boost them via the ROI. And I also think that you don't have to just, one thing I've talked about a lot in Discord with a lot of different people is when you have your lineups and you run The Sims, you don't just have to play like, oh, the first lineup is the one I have to play the most. That's the best lineup. Like you can sort your favorites and then look through those lineups for lineups you really like and find different ones, look for dupes, obviously things like that. So I don't want to say that I just reject the Sims because more often than not I let them do their job, but I will make small little tweaks, and I know you're similar in that way.
There's two things I do with The Sims as far as adjustments go. And first of all, this comes from a place that The Sims are very good. You definitely don't want to be outsmarting The Sims in a major way. But there are instances where a lot of times it's just personal preference. So sometimes on like showdowns or small slates like this, you'll get, let's say, 80% of a player. I would ask yourself, if that player got hurt on the first play, would you be okay losing just 80% of your entries right away? And me as a coward, a lot of times the answer is no. So I will bring that down a lot via the global exposure, let's say to 50%. And the best part about that is, you mentioned it, you're not getting bad lineups from somewhere else. You're still getting the highest ROI lineups that just look a little different than the 80% you were getting initially. So they're always going to be good, even with the adjustments you make. The second situation I'll make adjustments is with uncertain playing time. A good example on this slate is Marquise Brown. You're going to get a projection, which is largely a guess, not just from us, like sportsbooks have to guess on this. Everyone has to guess how much Marquise Brown is going to play. If you disagree with it, you can make small boosts, either up or down. I prefer using via ROI as compared to the projection boost you can make. And that's just basically a feel situation, or maybe it's exploitative depending on ownership or one other thing. But like one guy I'm never boosting is like DeAndre Hopkins, solidified role. We know exactly what you're getting. It has to be a situation with some uncertainty for me to boost a player like that.
I'll go for me. Pacheco could be a guy like that. We don't know what the hell's going on. And say you have an inference or you want to make a stand that he's going to take over the backfield this week. Well, that's something that's not going to be really factored in, and you can do that. But as you said, it's a slippery slope of you don't want to start just tweaking everything, because at the end of the day, these are really, really strong tools. And so I think you nailed it of how you can do it. And you want to make sure you're still getting really solid lineups there. Let's work down though. So, Flowers, I'm assuming is good to go. Bateman, it was like, oh, is he going to play? He did play, and he only had one catch, but it happened to be a touchdown. Baltimore is interesting. Aguilar sporting a Q tag as well. We'll see if he can get in clear protocol. I'm not sure what else to do. I think everyone else is an afterthought. So this is where Lamar starts to get interesting. We'll talk about Likely and Andrews, but if you do go Lamar, is it just skinny with Flowers, or do you want to go to cheap Baltimore pass catchers?
I think you can absolutely go to Bateman. I think he's going to play. I think Aguilar is going to miss. He's still logging DNPs with a concussion. That's not good for a game, 2 days after his latest DNP. So I think he misses. And Bateman, he's a little volatile just because he's not like a priority in the pass game, but I've been very impressed with him this year and the steps he's taken. And his price gives you some wiggle room. He doesn't need to be perfect at 4,800. So he kind of makes a pretty natural stacking partner with Lamar. The only thing I think you could argue is that you have players at tight end who are cheaper that have similar roles to him. So I don't anticipate myself being overexposed to Bateman or anything like that. I imagine a lot of my Lamar lineups will be Zay Flowers and then mixing and matching the tight ends in Bateman. I don't really have a lot of interest in Tylan Wallace either, even though I do think he's the pretty clear wide receiver 3. It's just like with Wallace, they run so much 12 personnel that what are you looking at? 40% of the snaps?
It's tough because of, you mentioned, they've got two very, Likely is a hybrid and Andrews knows what's going on. So that is difficult. But these other teams are difficult too. I mean, we talked about Pickens. Calvin Austin was good. He did his thing. He had 4 for 65 in the last game. At 3,800, he was a really popular paydown option. I assume that outside of really crazy mega mind genius stuff, Mike Williams, Van Jefferson, these guys are relegated to the outside looking in.
I think so. Mike Williams is like the perfect example of a guy I would never boost the projection on at this point. With two teams, he's been very stable at like 25% of the snaps and routes, maybe 30% is the ceiling. And there's a chance he goes down, honestly, with Pickens back. I guess you could make the argument, all right, is Pickens back to his full role? I think the answer's got to be yes. Like, they're playing for a lot in this conference. And I think it probably affects Calvin Austin the most. I say this tentatively because he played so well without Pickens, but still, he was the player that was sort of a part-time player around 45, 50% of the snaps and routes before Pickens got hurt. Jefferson was playing more, but do they make that switch because of Calvin Austin's performance of late? I think the answer could be yes. I have more interest in Austin than anyone else among the cheap receivers for this team.
Then the last team to talk about, and chat, you guys as usual are on it. Who, if anybody, takes Tank Dell's role? He was having a huge game, an awful injury. Obviously, get well soon. 6 for 98 and a touchdown. Mechie? Is it committee? Did they do something else? I mean, is there underpriced Texans that now step up?
I think Mechie's probably the first place you look. He's coming off an injury himself. He had like a decent midpoint of the season and then fell off pretty drastically, and his snaps have been declining. I don't know how much of that is injury related or not, but I think he's the most similar in terms of skill set to Tank Dell at this point. Robert Woods and Xavier Hutchinson sort of have an overlapping skill set, and I don't see either of them taking a significant jump, especially with Hutchinson recently seeing a pretty severe decline, and he didn't really bump back up until the Tank Dell injury. But I honestly think they might prefer Robert Woods to him individually right now. But all in all, those guys I think are similarly priced. They were sort of splitting work to begin with. I think Mechie's probably the player that sees the biggest boost.
I have to agree. I think it's hard to think that it's not him getting the opportunities as well. I don't know that you need to plug and play any of them, but certainly going to be a look. And if you go to Stroud, I think a lot of people as a +2, a +3, Nico's going to be in there, but Nico +1 more, especially if you don't go Schultz. But let's talk about Schultz. We're making good time here. We've got tight ends on the board, and for a 4-game slate, a 4-team slate, a 2-game slate, these are the same guys. There's a lot of good tight ends on this slate. Kelsey, Andrews, Schultz, Freiermuth, likely. These are good players. Kind of open-ended. What are your thoughts just on the range as a whole? It's pretty indifferent to me. You have a lot of ways to play this.
None of them are expensive, so I think this is the premier position to correlate with your quarterback as best you can. Mm-hmm. It's like a fantastic way to add in a second stacking partner. If you're playing like Lamar and Zay, all right, now you can pick between Andrews and Likely, and I think they're both pretty solid plays considering some of the injuries at receiver Baltimore has, mainly just Aguilar. But they're both playing a majority of the snaps to begin with. This is a base 12 personnel team. Last week, Andrews 76% of the snaps, Likely 66, and it hasn't changed a ton in recent weeks off of that base. So I think they're awesome stacking partners. Like Schultz is at 4,100. The most expensive tight end we have is Kelsey. He's kind of in a discussion of his own, but even he's not expensive. So I do like pairing with QBs. I actually like 2 tight ends quite a bit on this slate. And there's a lot of ways you can go. I think the only thing I can definitively say is Freiermuth is my least favorite now that Pickens is back.
Yeah, Freiermuth was a little quiet in the last game, and he was out there. But Darnell, they did 12 personnel as well. Your boy Darnell Washington was out there.
God, he's good.
He's
my anti-goblin of the week.
Yeah, he's the whatever. Man. Did you know Irv Smith was on the Texans? I didn't know that.
I found that out this morning when I was looking at this show.
Okay, I forgot he existed, and certainly didn't have him there. Shout out Irv Smith. I think Dalton Schultz, again, he's going to be popular. He should be. He had 8 targets in the last game, 5 for 45 and 1. Tank Dell being out can't hurt him. If nothing else, there'll just be more targets up for grabs, and Collins can't take them all. I'm sure the answer is yes, because on a 2-game slate, you're going to have a lot of latitude. You anticipate having any double tight end lineups?
I think I'm going to have a lot.
Yeah, it does fit in a lot of ways.
And the projection, I don't anticipate being significantly different. So, all right, this is a fun exercise. Kelsey is in the same price range as DeAndre Hopkins, Xavier Worthy. Who are you taking straight up?
I would take Kelsey. Well, you know what? I think I'd put Worthy slightly ahead of Kelsey, but it's those two. Both ahead of Hopkins for me.
I agree. And maybe price adjusted, you could say Kelsey because he's 300 cheaper. That'll be close. No real difference there. All right, now we get to like the Mark Andrews, Dalton Schultz tier. You're competing with Calvin Austin, Robert Woods, Mike Williams. Who do you prefer?
Yeah, this is where tight end starts to separate. I think Hollywood Brown is probably the one name they're ultimately competing with, more Andrews than Schultz, but far and away, I prefer Schultz than basically anyone in the range. Most of the guys are unplayable next to him.
I agree. And Hollywood's a little more expensive. So maybe that 300 goes somewhere. Probably not. It's a 2-game slate. And then I think when you get way down to the bottom, there's like almost no question. Likely at 3,500, I would prefer him to any player in this range. I honestly think a guy like Noah Gray is still in play at 3,300. Like, I'm definitely not going to X him out. I don't think I'll play a lot because I don't know if it's necessary. But if I get some Noah Gray lineups, I'm not going to force it out.
No, no doubt about it. Because again, a guy like that, you know what you're getting. You're going to get a couple targets, and if he nearly had a touchdown on Saturday, I watched that game, and he scores there, it changes the entire complexion of the slate. Is Deontay playing this week? My guess would be no. But what do you think?
I don't think he plays. We'll see on this. If he plays, I imagine it's probably just like
A package or two.
yeah, like what could you really do for him at this point? There is one wrinkle with tight end I want to bring up quickly. Cade Stover is projected to be back. He had that, the emergency appendectomy, but prior to his departure, the game before he left, 59% of snaps, Dalton Schultz was at 68%. I think there's a decent chance they do use more 12 personnel just out of necessity without Dell. But I at least want to bring his name up because he had been carving out like a quiet, nice little role for himself there before the appendectomy.
Interesting. Do you view him more as someone that might cannibalize, or do you actually think that there's a world where you jam, say, all of this? We talked about 3 of 4. Say you go all 4 of them where you actually could play Cade Stover.
This is going to be a feel thing. And this is a situation where I could see maybe adjusting like your ROI boost in the Sims tool, something like that. It's going to just be literally, all right, do you think this team uses a little more 12 personnel without Dell, or do you think they give, a full snap share to Mechie coming off the injury?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the answer to that. And honestly, what might decide for me is just straight up ownership. But if I got a Cade Stover lineup, I don't think I would get rid of it. And honestly, given the configuration of the Texans, I'm not sure it affects Schultz that much. They just don't have anybody to throw the ball to.
No, they're kind of out of options at this point. I mean, they're running pretty thin, and they just are who they are. And these are last thing I want to do. I actually didn't even really look at this. Not that it's, but I want to look at what's the spread on that game. We got
The Ravens
5.5 and 3. Steelers are 3-point home dog. Both teams at home are home dogs, which is not surprising, but competitive games. This is going to be an interesting slate. I think the team totals will be pretty relatively healthy, slight leans to obviously the away teams. But yeah, I mean, 12 personnel could absolutely be in the cards there. I never would have thought that. All right. I mean, there's only 4 defenses. I'm assuming you don't care. Texans, Steelers, Chiefs, and Ravens. It's a crapshoot. You just let the Sims do the job, whatever's left.
That's what I always do.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have a preference matchup wise on these? I almost think the Texans are semi-interesting for leverage all the way down there with that pass rush.
Yeah, I mean, step one, what I do with defense is nothing. I don't really care. But if I did care, I think one of the big like false equivalencies with defense, and I'm not saying like, look at the Packers last night. They gave up no points. That's fantastic. But more importantly than giving up no points, because that was the first shutout of the year, is you actually want opportunities. That's the key. You want opportunities to have stuff happen. And the Texans are a team that will certainly have opportunities against Lamar. And I think both pay down defenses are going to be the ones that people go to. The Steelers, we know what they can do in terms of getting pressure, and they'll have opportunities against Mahomes. If Mahomes throws the ball 40 times. Yeah, that's probably the most popular defense. I think people will play the Steelers defense because Mahomes is not going to be popular, and people don't want to, of course, stack against their own defense. People are going to overhaul the indoor game and then go like Warren, Steelers defense, and Worthy. And I think that's what lineups will look like.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. The tackle position for the Chiefs is a real problem for that team right now. And if Mahomes is still compromised on the ankle, I don't know how he heals so fast, but I don't think he's 100%. The other thing that might be interesting, the Houston offensive line, I cannot believe they're as bad as they are given their personnel. Maybe the Ravens just get home before Stroud can exploit that secondary. Baltimore's D-line is still pretty good. So that's interesting. I don't love them at 3,200. You can kind of make a case for almost every defense on the slate. I think in a vacuum, Steelers are my favorite, but I will let the Sims tool do the deciding for me.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where you're at. You can make cases, and don't be afraid. It's 2 games. You can have some guys going against your own defense. That's just going to be the norm on something like this. Don't be afraid. And one last thing I always like to say on 2-game slate, I think if you're playing in large field tournaments, consider actually just removing one team from a lineup. That is a way to be different. Large majority of lineups, they play all 4 teams just because it looks cleaner and whatnot. But there is a chance that one of these games, one team scores under 10 points, and you literally don't want the team at all. You can get leverage by going, just get a team out of there. If you don't have a Texan or you don't have a Steeler, certainly if you didn't have a Raven, that's a little aggressive, but you would really be different. So it's little things like that can make all the difference, sir. Any final thoughts for the people? Nice little Christmas slate for us here.
Yeah, Christmas Eve today. Happy holidays to everyone that decided to spend some time with us. We appreciate it very much. You allow us to do this, something Ben and I both love. Everyone on our team loves being able to do this for you. So your presence is very much appreciated. Just want to say that. Thank you, and please enjoy your holidays. It's the best time of year.
Well said. I always do like to say that around the holidays because it's true. For a lot of people, they watch these shows and we don't know what's going on in their lives at all. And we hope if you're not having a great holiday, we get to talk about sports for an hour. I hope it's a welcome distraction, if nothing else. And if things aren't going well, I know the holidays can be a tough time, but just know that, there's help out there. And on a much lighter note, we hope this is just a way to escape real life. And, things change. We hope the new year for everybody is happy, healthy. And we just want to say thanks. Stokastic's a big family and you guys are a part of it. So just really appreciate everyone. 2-game slate in the books. There will be main slate content after Thanksgiving, after Christmas. But until next time, guys, for me, Matt, Jordan Klein behind the glass. He powers this show each and every week. Just have a happy holiday. Appreciate all you guys. Good luck. Win some money. We'll talk to you soon.